Hi, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to our show, let me introduce the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. I then, at the end of that, will put in my 2 cents on the topic and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. We are getting 2019 off to a fabulous start because we have not only, as usual, some very interesting topics, but an experienced, talented, smart panel, as usual, but particularly excellent panel tonight. So Matt Hills, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you, Ken.
Matt, as our viewers know, was chair of the school committee for maybe
a little over 3 years.
A little over 3 years.
And vice chair for another 2.
But you served 8 years from Ward 7 on the school committee and retired a year ago from the school committee.
I hit my term limits. It was a year this January 1st.
And we have a real, I don't know if you call it a scoop. We have something special here, which is Matt's first public speaking appearance since he left office. Is that correct, Matt?
And my self-imposed exile of 1 year is over. Yes.
So when we jumped in there, CBS, NBC, ABC, they were all trying to get you, but
But I came to New TV for Ken Parker. Sorry, CNN, MSNBC, not going to happen.
How about Fox News?
Yeah, they weren't interested. Actually, they probably were interested. Anyway, thanks, Matt, very much for coming on. And Dick Blazer, welcome back, Dick.
Good to be here, Ken.
Yeah, it's been a few months since we've had you on. I think we were during part of that marijuana discussion.
A little bit, right.
We had some development-related issues, but you've been on this in 2018. But now it's a new year, and sometimes in Newton, what's new is old again, or what's old is new again. I think, and so we have some of the same topics and maybe some fresh topics for the new year. So a lot to get to. What we want to do tonight is take a look at some of the big issues that'll be coming up in the new year, and maybe a little bit of a look back at last year. One of the things that we've talked about on the show a lot recently is the proposed new zoning framework. And this is a massive rewrite of the entire zoning ordinances for the city of Newton. And rather than just amending some sections, just throwing out the whole thing and putting in a new zoning code. And so what I've asked every panelist on the show is, do you have any clue what's in this? And I don't mean that, in a sense like that my guests aren't smart and informed. I've got usually the most smart and informed, at least on local issues, people in the city around this table, and to date, I have yet to find anyone who truly understands what's being proposed here. So I'm going to ask my usual question. We all tend to know a little bit, at least, about our own properties that we own, and those of us who own our homes in the city. So I'm going to ask the panelists to start out with, under this new proposed zoning ordinance, could you build more or less than you could on your property under the current zoning ordinance? Matt, do you have any idea what the answer to that is?
I have no idea, and I know that whenever I've asked people on the city council what it's about, I never get the same answer the same answer more than once. So the answer to your question is no, and I don't know whether I could build more or not. And I'm not sure what will be accomplished by it. I mean, I'm sure there's a game plan and a strategy. I just don't know what it is.
Do you know what the goal of the zoning reform is? What's the problem that they're trying to fix?
So recognizing that, maybe I'm your sort of typical person who should know but doesn't.
Nobody knows, Matt. So if you know, you'll be the
Lyle
first.
has done a great job in Ward 7, Lyle Baker, trying to sort of set up meetings. I haven't gone to them. I can tell you what I've been told. All sorts of things that have been non-conforming that have sprung up around the city. The code will now be changed so that those things will now no longer be non-conforming. I will also sometimes hear, well, this is also a way to allow lots more building to go on. Other people say, oh, no, 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 no. We're just bringing the code up to date, that it may or may not be about building. I honestly don't know.
Okay. Dick, we've talked about this a little bit before, but
Yeah.
you own a house in Newton.
I do.
Would you be able to, under the current zoning, we've got setback requirements, we've got floor area ratio, there's so much you can build without a special permit. Under this zoning proposal, would you be able to build more or less on your property? Do you know?
Well, I think probably I would be able to build more, but I have to say that.
You know more about, okay.
Well, I have to say they just came from a zoning meeting in
Well,
Ward
fill
6.
us in, Dick. Tell
Well,
us about
unfortunately, Ken, I had to leave early.
I know, but
So I missed.
you get the handout, though? Did they have a cheat
I
sheet
got a
to
little.
it?
I got a little hangout
hang out.
somewhere here in my pocket. But it basically.
What are they trying to accomplish?
very-
Seriously, I really would like to know what the goal of this thing is. You were at they must have had an introduction at the meeting saying,
They
here's
did.
the problem we're trying to solve.
Well, I don't look at it as a problem that we're trying to solve. I think I looked at it and I've talked to some people about it. And it is very confusing because they're going through now the first stage of it, and what they're doing is they're trying to set up a system where you basically can build more on smaller land. So
This is about building.
I think
denser development.
I think it absolutely is about building density
And
development.
did they say why they want to allow people to build
Well,
denser
they
development?
don't. I don't think that they're necessarily. That's what they're aiming to do. I don't think they've said that, but from what I have gathered is that basically.
So
you
what are
can-
they saying that the purpose of this is?
Well, what the purpose is, they say, is that they want to go to the context of what's in your neighborhood. But that is the type of whether you have single-family places, two families, or more. They want to, as far as the residential side is concerned, they want to look at what the context is, and they want to bring all the. There's a lot of probably, I would say, sometimes 75 or 80% of the neighborhood you're looking at is non-conforming, because the houses were built before the new zoning laws came in. So they're non-conforming, but that's okay if they're non-conforming. But what they want to do now is to change the zoning.
So basically, if something's denser, things aren't non-conforming because they're less dense than what's allowed. They're non-conforming because they're more dense. So they want to liberalize the zoning ordinance to make all those very dense things. If someone built a big house on a small piece of land before the floor area ratio is passed, or before the setbacks were passed, they want to legalize that and make that legal for everybody, thereby basically allowing much denser development. Is that correct?
Well, to be honest,
Or do you not know the answer to that?
well, my take on this is that basically you're going to be able to build more than you can build now on the same piece of land. That to me is very clear.
Okay.
Very clear. In fact, I've been talking to some people. They say, for instance, if you have a 10,000 or a 15,000 square foot single-family house in that
Lot, you mean?
in that lot,
Yeah.
that
The house wouldn't be big. You mean the lot is 10,000?
the lot is 10,000 square feet. Let's say 15,000, depending on the size of it.
Yes.
That basically you may be able to build a lot more than just one family on that house, on that lot. And the details of it are what you have to look at, and have not been cut in stone yet. But they're trying to detail exactly what you can do. So, but to me, it's clear that this whole purpose of rezoning for the whole city is a very important thing for everybody to look at.
But do you have a sense that this is something we need to do? Like, if we didn't rezone the whole city, what would the consequence of that be?
I'm not so sure. We do have to. It's something we have to do. It's not something. I don't think we have to do it. I think they're trying to. They said the last time we had a serious zoning change was 1987. And I'm not quite sure. I asked somebody who's been around a long time what happened in 1987. And he said to me that I don't think there was that much done in 1987.
So here's my question, and I would ask anyone at home watching I'd love to hear the answer to this. Please send me an email at ken@kenparker.org if you know A, what the point of this ordinance is, or B, if you know for your own property whether you could build more or less and how it would change. I mean, Dick, you talk about 1987. That was before I was elected. I was on the Board of Aldermen, elected in 91, sworn in January 1st, 92. But I'm familiar with what happened in the earlier rounds of zoning amendments, and we had a number of rounds while I was on the Board of Aldermen, and they were all incremental changes. We put in place the floor area ratio requirements. We changed some setbacks, changed some rear lot subdivision rules. They were all, but basically they were all built on a foundation of what the zoning was. Zoning law is really just, if you think about it, a contract between you and your neighbors and the rest of the community, saying that I can't build whatever the heck I want. I can't build a nuclear waste dump on my property or a 10-story tower, but neither can you.
Can I cut in somewhere here?
No, let me finish.
Okay.
All right. So what I'll get back to you in a second.
That's okay.
Let me just finish the thought, which is that I lose my train of thought a lot these days. Now, the point is that the certainty of what's in the zoning ordinance is the benefit of it, and I don't understand why one would be at all interested in throwing out that certainty with a wholesale change. And what I worry about, and I'm not sure that this is the case, but I'm worried it might be the case, that this whole zoning reform is what we call in the legal biz, it's pretextual. In other words, they're saying they want to make it nice and neat and fit into little categories, and that there's a process reason for doing it, or that there's a conformity, it makes the map nicer, it's easier to follow. But what they're really trying to do is radically transform the city to be a much denser community, because that's the real agenda. I don't know that that's true for a fact, but as I've had a chance to look through some of the charts and tables, and I'd ask anyone to go to the city website and read these memos that the planning department puts out, and read the ordinance, and especially my colleagues at bar, the other lawyers in the community, read these draft ordinances, because it sounds to me like what, and I asked Greg Reedman, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, so a great project for the Chamber would be to say, here's what you can do now, have your, the land use or zoning subcommittee of the Chamber of Commerce say, here's what you can do now, here's what you'd be able to do with this proposal. Because what concerns me is that folks are not being upfront about what the real objectives are. And so I want to use that to segue to our next topic. But Dick, go ahead. What's your thought on this?
Well, I do want to say that I am very concerned for the people in this city as to what's going to happen with rezoning to their various homes, because you're living in a house that you like because you moved in that place, in that neighborhood, and all of a sudden you may find out that with the rezoning, somebody right next door to you can put in 6-family house or a 10 unit apartment house, even though right now you're in a single residence district. And so to me, that is a real problem, and I think that has to be looked at very carefully, because the residents of the city are living where they're living because they want it that way. They don't necessarily want to have some changes made in their neighborhood.
I'm not sure that you'd be able to put 10 units where only one is allowed by right, but one thing I noticed in reading this, and I really hope that other people are going to read through this ordinance, it's painstaking, and try to understand it, but it looks to me like they've decided that everywhere around where they say is a village center, what they're allowing is multifamily. That means if you live in a currently single resident zone, in other words, on a given 10 or 15,000 or however many square foot property, you're allowed to build a house with one family in it, a one-family house, not a two-family house or a three-family house. They've decided village centers are a good place for multifamily housing, and that will no longer require a special permit, and it will become a by right use. Now, I could be reading this wrong, but no one has contradicted my understanding of that point yet. And I've talked with a lot of people about it, and people have either said, yeah, I think that sounds right, or I'm not sure, or that looks like that's consistent with what I've heard. No one has actually said, no, Ken, they aren't doing that. They aren't allowing multifamily around village centers. And the other thing that I wonder about, and I we've got smart, well-informed people here who don't know the answer to this, and that's why I'm asking our audience. We've got a pretty good-sized audience. So people do call, people do email. So ken@kenparker.org. Tell me if I'm wrong that it would allow currently single-family districts to be developed multifamily. So my question for Matt, though, is, Matt, you were chair of the school committee. You have a you have a finance background. I should have introduced your professions, but Matt, you're a private equity investor. Do you want to mention the name of your firm, or it's
Managing Director at LLM Capital Partners.
LLM Capital Partners. And Dick, while we're at it, what's your law practice called?
I'm an attorney, a solo practitioner.
Dick Blazer, attorney. Richard Blazer, attorney at law.
That's right.
Okay, Matt, you understand finance. You were the chair of the school committee, dealing with some pretty tough budgetary issues, as I recall. How much do we spend per student in the Newton Public Schools?
Well, there's a few different ways of looking at it. You know, you've got kind of the average cost, which is probably the least relevant. You know, it's probably, I don't know, $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 a student. The more interesting way to look at it in terms of development is the incremental cost as you add
You're
students.
anticipating my question. So it's 16 to 18,
Okay.
but there's an incremental cost. And so my question is, what would be the impact on our school system if we had another 1,000 students in the schools, or another 10%? How many? Were we around 10,000 students?
12,000 or
12,000?
10,000. Yeah.
So another 10%. Do we have 10% reserve capacity? What would the effect on the teachers? What would be the effect? And because as you know, we're talking about without even this zoning reform, just with existing special permit projects in the pipeline, they're talking about close to 1,000 units on Needham Street, thousands of units along the Washington Street corridor. So potentially a pretty significant increase in the number of students in our school system. Are we ready for that? What would the cost impact be?
So let me kind of answer that with sort of a few different comments. The first is I want to just encourage you and everyone else to ignore the average cost per student of 17 or 18,000 because there's so much overhead in there that's not a relevant number. So let's go back to your question.
What's the incremental cost then
yeah.
if we added 10% to our?
So in my time on the school committee, in general, when some of these new development projects came online, I always felt that if you looked at the actual data on how many students were added, it was the fears were grossly exaggerated about how many students were going to just pour into the school system from, you know, a 200 unit or whatever it is, Avalon project.
Well, we have the school committee has some hard numbers on
Yes.
what's actually coming.
And so that was sort of in the time I was on there. The scale of the projects now, however, is, you know, just the sort of the whole Washington Street development, what could happen at Riverside, and the whole Northlands development are vastly greater.
I said close to 1,000. I believe it's 850 units there.
And you know, we'll see what ends up getting passed, but these are much, much larger than anything that we were looking at in the time I was on the school committee. So here's the way I would answer your question. In general, as we have rebuilt our schools, both building new buildings and renovating, we've tried to be smart about it, and most of the time we actually have been smart about it. We're not just fixing up an existing school, we're adding additional capacity. And we're adding additional...
Do we have excess capacity now?
Yes.
What percentage?
But so this is where your question is a lot more nuanced and interesting than you think. Because
I only asked interesting questions, Matt.
I'll leave you and your viewers to pass judgment on that. The reason I say that is because it's a very different answer. Your question has a very different answer if you're talking about the middle schools or the high schools or the elementary schools. So Susan Wolf-Ditkoff, who was chair in Brookline of the school committee when I was chair in Newton, always used to give this analogy to snowflakes. We love snowflakes, like we love children. But snowflakes don't fall evenly across a city, you know, all at exactly the same time. And children coming into the school system are not distributed evenly across the city at exactly the same time. So if you're asking me, could we add several hundred more people to our elementary schools, of course we can. There's plenty of physical capacity there. That's a different question.
What's the cost? Don't you need more teachers at a certain point?
Well, sure.
Or you have larger class sizes.
But you're asking a question about capacity. You're not asking...
I'm asking about the budgetary impact.
Well, okay.
Is what I'm getting
That's
at.
an additional question. Let me answer that in a minute. The problem with the answer that I gave is it's not a in general, can we add hundreds of new students? It depends where. So we have
And in what grades.
certain, exactly. So we
right.
have certain elementary schools that are particularly
So,
crowded.
well,
And-
let's say there's
but
redistricting, Matt. What I'm getting at is, what effect does it have on the budget if we add?
So just let me sort of
Okay.
He's
dri-
getting
drive
there.
this.
He's
because-
getting there.
Because saying we can have redistricting, that's an easy answer, only as long as it's an easy answer. And what I
Well-
mean by that is if you are super crowded in kind of the northern school districts and you've got plenty of capacity
Okay.
on the southern side,
Let
saying,
me
well,
ask
we
you a
can
question I
redistrict.
know you know the
So
answer
now
to,
let's
Matt.
talk about budgetary impact.
Matt, let me ask you this. There's a certain percentage of the school budget, obviously, that's plant and equipment, but most of it's teachers and people, right? What percentage of the school budget is the human beings who work in our school system?
So now you're getting to the heart of the issue. So about 86% of
About
the
86.
budget.
I knew you'd know the answer to
And-
that one.
And it's, you're talking about, we have over 2,000 employees. Approximately 30 of those employees are non-union.
Mm-hmm.
So you have all but 30 of our employees that are
So
members of the union.
just to-
So the issue that you're
At the
bringing
risk of
up,
oversimplifying the question, though, Matt, if you wanted to maintain teacher-to-student ratio as an average over the some places it would go up a little, some places it would go down, and you added 10% to the student capacity, what percentage would that add 10%, or would that add less than 10% to that 86? Wouldn't you need to add 10% at least to that 86% of the budget, because you'd need?
you're way oversimplifying it, but that's a reasonable rule of thumb.
It could be a little more or a little less, depending on
That's
where.
exactly right, because you're going to have certain classes
Mm-hmm.
that can absorb additional students, and you may need to have certain classes that you are just too. You have two classes that might be too large, and you have to add additional teachers. There may be financial limitations
Mm-hmm.
where you're going to take on additional students. You can't add those additional teachers because you don't have the revenue allocation for
Well-
it, and therefore class sizes go up.
Right.
So
but the
it-
premise
it's-
of my question is, Matt, is we keep class size the same, trying to keep that
So
parameter.
the issues you're raising have shifted a little. The first question was, is there capacity? And in general, the answer to your question is yes. It's not going to be the same answer, if you start saying, and all the students are being added in this quadrant or in that
Sure.
quadrant or in that quadrant, or they're all being added at the middle school where we're tightest on capacity. The second thing
Well,
I'd say-
eventually, if there's more people, they will eventually make it to middle school, even if they start in elementary, presumably.
Correct, but there's a difference between everyone descending at the same time versus in the ordinary course of events. You should also realize, by the way, that the school department under Liam Hurley, who's the CFO and in charge of all the facilities work that goes on, super, super bright guy. He has brought in a consultant to help not only with the projections, but to help the school department and school committee understand
And Margaret
the
Albright,
exact
actually,
question that
a
you
school committee member from Ward 2, and font
Excuse
of
me,
knowledge.
excellent school committee member from Ward 2.
Sat at this very table and described that they use three methodologies for predicting the number of students that would be coming into the schools based on these new developments. And incidentally, the developer estimates were about 50%. Slightly under 50% of the actual number of students that enter the Newton Public Schools. So,
Shocking, shocking.
so
There's gambling in this establishment.
yes, right.
But let me make, I don't want to lose sight of the overall point here. If you leave aside issues like, the new students don't always show
Okay.
up where there's capacity, we have built significant amounts of excess capacity into the system over the years. That, however, doesn't mean whatever the number of additional students is, there's always enough capacity at every grade level. Some schools have more, some schools have less.
Okay, and if we go beyond capacity, if there's more than we can handle, and we decide we need another school, what's the timetable from the moment that you realize that to when you can put the tushes in the seats? How long does that take?
So I'm going to kind of just ignore the comment about need another school, because while theoretically you could get to that point, that's so unlikely to happen that I think kind of the more likely kind of scenario would be if we needed it, adding capacity to existing schools. So it depends. If an override is needed to fund it, because it's
let me
a
give you the
major
example.
addition,
Let me give the example.
it's
of
going to take.
How long did the Zervis? You presided over the Zervis project. That was building a new school in place of an existing school.
So from the time that first went on the drawing board till the time we had the override, till the time we started and finished Zervis, that would have been 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years.
Now,
Okay.
it could easily be longer because right now there's a bunch of school projects that are in the pipeline that are highly, highly unlikely to happen without additional funding. That's code for override. And I don't know
You think
that
the city needs an override to maintain to do what? What are these projects?
I don't want to say the city needs an override. The city will need an override if they want to rebuild additional schools. That doesn't mean we must have an override. That's a political question. I'm just saying.
Well,
that
you're
the
a politician, or at least a former one. What is your answer to that?
Well,
should we? What would be good for the city?
Ken, I've worked on 3 overrides on the yes side, and I was sort of a very visible spokesperson on your show and lots of other debates.
As I recall.
What I'm saying, though, is leave aside politically can it pass or not. It is it is simple arithmetic. Yeah, they'll be able to do the new Lincoln Elliott and probably fix up the existing, as a swing school. And yeah, they'll probably be able to convert Horace Mann to pre-K within the existing budget. They're not going to do the next wave of major renovations or rebuilds without significant new revenue, which means an override. And I don't know that there's anyone who's talking about an override in Ruth Ann's first term. So you're talking about the second term. If it even passes, that means 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, if it even passes. So
do you think that's in time? I mean, to keep on the track that the city has been on in terms of renovating these spaces, is that okay? 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Well, in general, given what I think the pace of new development is, probably, because these development issues are going to be fought out, over a period of time that's not measured in weeks. It's probably measured, sort of, I assume, over the next kind of couple of years.
Some of these proposals have been around for a while, though, and
but that doesn't mean that they're going to be finished.
Sure.
And everybody's going to move in a year or two. So if you're asking me,
a year or two, sure. Absolutely. I can tell you from 18 years on the Board of Aldermen that within a year or two, there will be lots of new units with people moving in the city.
So if that's correct, then I would still expect we're fine in terms of capacity without massive new school projects until we get to kind of a second mayoral term. Now, at some point, I mean, you have to tell me how many students are being added, and I can't.
Well, my
I can't
assumption
just make it up.
Let's say 10%.
So, it's impossible not to need new capacity if you're going to have another 1,300 to 1,500 students. Whether that's a major new addition to a high school or a middle school, I don't know. If it is, you're going to need additional revenue for it. If that additional revenue doesn't come, we're taking students. Just like the snowflakes fall, and they have to fall because they're coming, we're going to take new students. If we don't have the capacity in a given school, either students get bused across the city or class sizes rise. Again, it's simple arithmetic. You either add capacity if you're out of capacity, or you send people to where there's no school. My assumption is...
I'll let you finish that. I want to let Dick back into this conversation. Your assumption is what, Matt?
Yeah, I think it is so unlikely that we're going to have this massive influx of students in the very near term, that there is plenty of time to plan for this. But that means plan for it, not just say it's being planned for and then cross your fingers and hope for the best. Liam Hurley, so Liam is doing exactly what you want your CFO to be doing. It's not just, okay, we got 3 different methodologies. He has brought in an outside consulting firm that specializes in this, among other things, to help sort through what the impact is likely to be, given kind of the configuration of, studio 1, 2, 3 bedrooms in different parts of the city. The city will then, working with the schools, be able to plan where, if at all, additional capacity is needed. That, by the way, is sometimes easier said than done. You try adding additional capacity to Bigelow. Can't be done.
Matt, this is you've given me a couple of numbers though, which I find maybe a little more worrisome than you do, which is that the first is 3 to 5 years before we're going to have another override.
Well, I'm giving you as a private citizen a guess.
No,
I mean, not everybody runs for mayor and gets elected and says, "Oh, here's a great idea. Let me go for an override."
Right. Let me just put the numbers together though. And if what we need is, I mean, you're saying, but what we're going to need that just to tread water, essentially, to stay where we are in terms of this current pace.
We're going to need what to?
An override to keep our renovations of buildings on pace.
Well, yeah, but on pace means rebuilding some existing schools. That doesn't mean treading water. That means continuing with a plan.
Things continue to wear out, and we're continuing to replace them.
You're talking about something different. I'm talking about replacing and enlarging existing schools. That's not sort of maintaining existing buildings.
Okay.
That
No, I'm not saying maintaining. I'm saying replacing the older ones. And anyway, I mean, how long did we have Newton North High School before it got replaced? With 30 years. There's a life cycle. Maybe it's longer than that in the cases of some buildings. But you do need to have you do need a replacement cycle, obviously. And so, how many? What do we have? 15 elementary schools now.
15 elementary, 4 middle, and 2 high schools.
4 middle now, right? And 2. So in other words, if we replace one of them every other year, then we're on a 40-something year replacement.
Yeah, but that's way too aggressive a schedule. I mean, we have buildings that
let me get to the math
that
problem,
need to be replaced.
and then let me bring Dick into back.
For the math problem, you're going to
bring for the legal problem.
Okay.
The math problem to me is, if we realize we need significantly more capacity than we've currently planned for, it could take 6 years or more, you said, Matt, to get that significant additional capacity online. And my concern is people have no idea, and I mean this could be higher, could be lower, no idea, how much additional development will happen by right without a special permit if this zoning amendment passes.
Before you go to Dick, you're conflating different pieces of different things I said. If we know,
if I misquoted you, please.
Well, no, you didn't misquote, but you're conflating different things.
Okay.
And I think there's an overall point you're driving to. That's right. But so
set me straight.
So
then.
very clearly, if we know now we need additional or will need additional capacity in 2 or 3 years, we don't need 6 years to deal with that. We will be able to add an addition onto a building. If we know we need to take a small elementary school, knock it down, and rebuild it into a larger school, a la Zervis, that's not something you just do in 2 or 3 years.
We have a limited amount of flexibility on a shorter term horizon, but a major shift could require more time to plan. Is that a fair
Absolutely.
assessment?
And that major shift is in addition to the existing capital stock we have, the existing schools, what we need to replace.
Right. So that's what has me worried. But I want to let Dick into this because I think
the math question.
No. The question is, Dick. I mean that you as a ward councilor, ward alderman, ward councilor. For a number of years. What was it? Was it 8 years?
8 years, yeah.
8 years. We're in touch with the grassroots, the people in our neighborhoods, in Newton Center and Newton Highlands. What is your sense of whether this isn't of people's awareness of the school and willingness to pay more in taxes and awareness of the issues that Matt has raised?
I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're asking.
Okay, let me put it this way. It seems to me.
Can I say something first?
Okay, sure. Go ahead. Say whatever you want to say.
Well, look, my whole family is teachers. Okay, my 2 sisters are teachers. one of my two
One of
daughters.
at Bowen Elementary School.
That's right. That's
where,
right.
Where,
Probably
where,
taught
where
you.
I went to school.
That's right. And now she's teaching at Lincoln Elliott just as a English literacy aide.
Third grade.
Okay.
Sister taught me.
Now she's teaching lower. One of my two daughters is a teacher. My two sons-in-laws are teachers. My whole family is teachers, basically. Okay. So I think I know a lot about schools and teaching. I don't know what you're asking exactly to me now about in particular.
Well, let me ask it. Maybe I ask it poorly, and certainly there are times when I'm not sure what my question is, but I'm sure here, and I'm just not saying it clearly.
Yeah.
Let me phrase it another way. My family moved to Newton because there were terrific schools in Newton. My parents looked at a map of Massachusetts, researched, and said, we need a place with great schools. That's the thing we care about. So that's why I'm here.
That's why a lot of people are here.
That's exactly my point.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people in Newton are willing to pay for great schools. They're willing to pay more taxes for great schools. But what I worry about is that there isn't a thoughtful planning discussion happening in the city about the connection between development in the city and the quality of our schools. I think there's a visceral disconnect, and to the point where I think people are offended when, in discussing the development issue, if you say, well, that'll put more kids in the schools, and you get an answer like, what, do you hate children? No, I want to make sure that we have capacity to...
Let's separate two things, because there's the visceral answers, which, you know, do you hate children? Like that sort of discussion isn't helpful. Let me say, though, at the level of the adults with their hands on the steering wheel, the leadership of the school department, and I believe the leadership of the city, there is exactly that kind of conversation going on. When I talk about the kind of group that Liam Hurley has brought in to help with the planning.
Are they advising this zoning discussion? Because I think there's a disconnect.
Okay, so that's a different question.
That's my question.
Okay, so I think
there's an internal analysis within the school department.
Well, okay, there's an internal analysis within the school department coordinating with the city. That's different than saying, are we advising on the zoning process? I will give you a personal...
the data.
Okay. The answer, of course, is yes, or it will be once sort of the analysis is done.
Okay.
But I'll give you
I feel better already, Matt.
But, well, you should feel better. I mean, this is what you'd expect sort of good leaders to do. What I would say is the following, though. I have a view, you know, sort of all 8 years on the school committee, and it was a really strongly held view. Our job on the school committee is not to weigh in and try to influence zoning and development discussions other than as private citizens. We should not be there lobbying on behalf of the school system. However, that's not the end of the conversation.
Okay.
A required role for us is to make clear that we communicate exactly what the impact on the schools will be of any development or any series of developments. So it is not our role to say whether we should have more or less development. It's our role to say, and here's what the impact is going to be, and here's what the financial consequence is going to be.
Your 8 years on the school committee, I don't believe overlapped with my 18 on the Board of Aldermen, but I can say that was exactly not the practice during my 18 years on the Board of Aldermen. In other words, it was forbidden to talk about the impact on the schools of a development.
That's like ridiculous.
That is,
I mean, that doesn't mean you use it as a weapon to be pro or anti the development.
No, but it's reality.
But like,
no, I'm not talking about using it as a weapon. I'm talking about planning, and my attitude is, to the extent that there are people in our community who would like to see Newton's population go up considerably, they think it is good for the environment and it's good social policy to have potentially a 50% increase in our population. And people say that in good faith, and they're not bad people. And you can read blogs where they argue that, you know, that's the way to have the planet be more sustainable. We should have denser populated cities, more walkable village centers, and they make some pretty good arguments about that. I ultimately don't think that's the vision that I would like to see for Newton. But my point is, if that is the vision that we had for Newton, we should plan the capacity so that it comes online at the same time as that housing.
No sane, rational adult could disagree with that. I'm not going to, if I was chair of the school committee, I wouldn't stand up in front of the city council and say, please don't do this. I would stand up and say, if you choose A, B, or C, here's the consequence to the school system. We need to plan accordingly. Like, how do you not do that? If it was a company, if it was a nonprofit, if it's a school system, I mean,
Sure.
I don't even know what to say. If those conversations didn't take place, why not? Well, I guess don't answer why not. But
because
don't
of the personnel.
but
Because I'll tell you
the
why.
school population should not be weaponized in a development discussion.
No, I don't think it's. I think that what's lacking from the conversation, at least as I've heard it, is talking about the consequences, not in a weaponized way, but planning accordingly. I mean, for example, are we putting more cars on the streets? Have we planned the infrastructure there? Are our village centers, our pipes, are all of our infrastructure able to withstand the additional development? And I don't think those questions are adequately being discussed. I'm not saying no one's discussing them. I'm saying that, to me, that's the biggest gap in our civic discourse in the city these days, is there are people who think that we need more housing, not just more development generally, but that more housing specifically at any cost, and there is nothing that can persuade them that we don't need as much as we can approve as fast as we can approve it.
Look, I've been dealing with this since 8 years I was there. There are a bunch of people in the city who, if you are not for a housing project or any development project, if you don't go, whether it's Austin Street or whether it's Washington Street, across the street there, if you're against those projects, that means you're against affordable housing. Okay, that is completely wrong, and it's, to me, really a nasty way to deal with things, because I was a person who felt that those projects were too big, and I was accused of being against affordable housing. I voted for every affordable housing project that came in my 8 years, but those two projects to me were too big.
Austin Street, and what was the other one?
The Austin Street was, well, it's the Korf buildings on Washington Street, which was.
But now that's the new state. Those are small compared to the things that are being proposed these days.
The problem is that, as far as the development is concerned, I'm not somebody who thinks Newton should be nonstop development. I think most of the people who look at the city say, well, there's not a whole lot of room here for housing, and that's true. That's not to say that you can't put housing in certain areas and try to build for senior housing, which we're doing with Golden Mayer, and with other places in the city which we can put in housing. But the problem I have with the whole development thing is that if you're against a development and the development has to do with housing, then the fight back is, well, you're against affordable housing. I think, frankly, that we have a big problem with middle-class housing, which very many people talk about it, but the fact is that if you're middle class now, unless you have some help from your parents or you're making a lot of money, you can't buy a house. Well, no, but I'm saying you can't get into Newton unless you're
middle
class is gone, and that's a huge problem. Which
are you referring to the naturally affordable housing that's just market rate, but it's smaller units? They're not as modern, and a lot of those are being torn down.
Well, what's happening? That's right. The median price of the city last year, I think, for a single-family house was $1.1 million. Wow. Okay, $1.1 million. A middle-class person cannot buy that, and that to me is a real problem that nobody's looking at. I think that.
What do you think the answer to it is?
Well, I'll tell you in a minute. Affordable housing has always been a problem. If you're low income, this is not something new. And I think that the city is actually, way back in the 50s and 60s, when they had in my ward, Houghton Village, they had the Weeks School, where it was converted, and there was which I can't remember the name of it right now, right in Newton Center, there's for senior housing. there's 3 good housing projects for low income and senior housing right in Newton Center, and those are good projects. But it's difficult now to say to somebody, well, yes, you want to put in 200 units here, and 15% of them will be affordable housing, but is this a good project? And the developers will, of course, look, the developers care about one thing and one thing only, and that's making money, okay? And I think that if the city wants to turn Newton into, it's 89,000 people right now. I think it was about 81,000 9 years ago. So that's a pretty, about 10% up in increase. And I think, you know, the city, a lot of people in Newton don't want to have all of the crowds and everything else. And I don't think that's
well, there is a quality of life impact, obviously, more people, more traffic. That's something, again, the funny thing is when and you that's what I was getting at before, you walk the ward and you talk to people, you talk to people in the neighborhoods. What vision of the city do people have? I can tell you, I love Newton. I travel, visit my brother in Seattle. I travel to Colorado. There's a lot of fascinating, beautiful places where I have family and where I'm going on vacation. And I always think, this is a nice place to visit, but there's no place in the world I'd rather live than Newton, Massachusetts. And I feel like some of the people in charge of policy in our city don't really like Newton, and they have a vision. They want to make it more like Brookline. They would think that it would be better that way if we had a denser city, and they think that would just be a better place to live than the way Newton is now. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression I get.
I wouldn't. So, and I'm not weighing in one way or another, kind of on the more or less development. I would just say I wouldn't describe that as they don't really like Newton. Everybody has a view as to what could be different, and some people would make it less dense and have a lot more parks. That doesn't mean they don't like Newton. Some people would want more density.
That's a fair point,
That doesn't
Matt.
mean they don't like Newton.
So that they think Newton would be better if it were a more densely populated community. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think
and
that's
some people
that's a fair comment.
that's fine. I mean, some people believe that, and some people don't. And
I haven't heard anybody, by the way, think Newton should be a less densely populated community, that we should buy up housing and make it into parks. I don't think that's a real. That's a theoretical possibility, but I haven't met a single person who's articulated that view.
So no. I'm just sort of. I agree. I'm just saying it's not a matter of whether they like Newton or like someone.
They would like Newton better if it were more densely populated.
In a perfect world, even if you're talking about these larger developments and the impact on the schools, in a perfect world, the development would be so perfectly planned that to the extent there's additional infrastructure needed in the city, either physical infrastructure or additional schools, all the additional property tax revenue would go to fund that, and you'd plan these in a way so the impact on quality of life would be mitigated. It never quite works that way. Theoretically, with the additional development comes additional revenue that can be used in a way to make life better for everyone.
Not even theoretically if it's residential development, which is not a rateable. Residential development brings in less tax revenue than it consumes in the city.
If Mark Laredo was here right now, he would be arguing quite strongly that we're not going to have only residential development.
No.
What
what I'm
we
saying
need is additional commercial.
We absolutely
as well.
do, and Mark and I think, agree on this point. And one thing that you can very easily do is take the assessor's book, which they publish every year when they set the tax rate, and you can look at the bottom line number for commercial property value in the city, how many millions of dollars of commercial property value, or billions these days, and how many. And it's like, it used to be like 1.9 billion of commercial. And the point is, there's an ideal ratio, I think, where you have a primarily residential community that has a significant commercial tax base that helps, which because commercial properties, pay about twice the tax rate as residential in Newton. And not every community, but that's the way we've set our tax rate historically. And second of all, they don't have the impacts on the budget because they don't put kids in the schools. So they support the residential element. And what I think is right now we are south of the ideal ratio. In other words, I think we should have right now, we were, I think it was like something like 1/6 commercial and 5/6 residential. I think if we should edge towards a third commercial. I mean, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it would be a healthier, more sustainable, long-term financial balance in the city that would allow us not to need these overrides you're talking about and still to maintain a terrific school system. What I worry about is we're taking some of the prime commercial areas in the city, like in the Needham Street corridor, which was always described as like the #1 tax revenue generating section of the city, and we're taking that and turning it into a residential area. First with Avalon, and now with this proposed Northland development, and then across the street, Northland owns another few acres of property. I believe it's another 2.3 acres, I think. And they were talking about more housing there, and I think what we're doing is we're cutting off our nose to spite our
When you
face.
say we're doing it, this is coming from the developers, okay?
we are
and the city, at least a good part of it, has been going along with this. As far as I'm concerned,
I don't think our elected officials, and I count myself in this for the extent that I was part of the city council, the then Board of Aldermen when this was going on, can escape responsibility. Because if you're on a,
I think you're
if you're
right.
rolling down the hill and you don't say, "Hey, let's put on the brakes" or "Let's steer," then even if you keep your mouth shut about it, you share in the responsibility.
I think you're absolutely right, but I also think, frankly, that this is an issue, a very, very important issue, which should be decided, by the residents of the city, not decided
All
by.
right, and I agree, but I want to get to a couple other topics before our hour is up.
I don't even know what time it is. How much time do we have?
We have no time.
I don't want to be George H.W. Bush and look at my watch. So.
We've got a few minutes, so I'm going to run down. Let's just go around the table once. I'll start with Dick.
Yeah.
Can you give a letter grade to Mayor Fuller? How did she do in her first year?
I don't know if I can give her a letter grade, but I will say I think she's done a good job, a good start. I think she's spent a lot of time going over a lot of problems that the city has. I think she is a very smart woman. I think she is looking around to decide where she wants to go without making a quick decision and then sticking with it. I think she's got a lot of things on her plate right now. A development is one of them, for sure. And I think, hopefully, I think the second year we're going to get some actual good decisions made.
Okay, we got a lot to get to. I'm going to let Matt give his grade here.
So I would say for the first year of a new chief executive of our city, she's done most, if not all, of the things you'd want a new chief executive to do in a first year. So off to a very, very good start, I would say, including putting in place a really excellent management team. Very happy about Jonathan Yo as COO, Ellen Ishkanian as her communications person. I like Dana Hansen a lot on the community side. She's got a really good team there. I served with Jonathan for 4 years. He was chair of collective bargaining when I served with him. That being said, now we'll see what happens in year 2 and 3. Because you can't penalize Ruth Ann for not having made the decisions yet that don't come yet. Ruth Ann has done a very good job setting herself up for success. That success is going to come by making decisions which will be on controversial issues, which will enrage some people. That's the true test of a chief executive. Are you able to make decisions, some of which will be wrong, and not look back? I'm confident she's able to. I'm just saying, really good first year. She's put the pieces in place, the management team. She's begun work on key issues like development. She started collective bargaining process. Now it gets interesting.
Okay, I without repeating what I said on the last show, I'm very impressed with Ruth Ann Fuller's intellect and her understanding of detail. I think she's done a terrific job of improving morale in the city, treating city employees with respect. That's been a huge improvement
Yes, I agree
over
with
the
that.
Great
previous
job at that.
administration. But the one thing that I worry about is on a lot of the substantive issues, I'm not sure that she has expressed a willingness to take some of those controversial decisions. And I mean, one thing that's a great sign from before her administration, when she was an alderman, is that she was willing to take on the issue of post-retirement health care benefits. That's a good sign. However, when I've seen some of these issues come up, including the development issue, I have yet to hear her voice in this zoning discussion, for example. I think that we should have leadership from the mayor's office as to what the vision of the city is.
Well, I think
and then there are a bunch of smaller issues like overnight parking bans and things. I'd like to hear the mayor's voice in these conversations.
I think we're all saying
Let's go
the
to,
sa-
we're going
we're all
to the
saying
next
the
one.
same
We only have
thing.
a couple minutes left. Let's go to the next
Don't
one.
judge her for not weighing in yet.
No,
Let's
well-
ask the question a year from now.
Yeah, no, that's
Don't
right.
arbitrarily
I'm not-
decide after a year.
I haven't
I would
judged yet.
expect to hear that voice.
I'm hoping. I have not judged yet. I'm nervous. That's how I'll put it.
We should all be nervous about
I'm a
lots
little.
of
I'm,
things.
I'm a little bit
We
nervous.
have a recession coming. That's going to upset all the other plans we have.
But I think there. Let's put it this way. I think there have been some opportunities to weigh in that she's not taken advantage of, but she's taking a cautious, step-by-step approach. I respect that. We'll see how this. If this zoning comes to a vote without her articulating a strong view on it, that will be a sign that there isn't some of that decision-making going on that I think we need. 2019 municipal elections. Any thoughts on those? It's an election year. Matt, any thoughts on the election coming up? You running again?
I'm not running in.
How about you, Dick?
Kathy
You running?
Shields,
I don't think
Kathy Shields
so.
is my replacement. Kathy Shields
Well,
is
there's
a
other
phenomenal
offices.
school committee member.
You what about?
You want me to run against Mark Laredo?
No,
I'm
no,
like his
no.
treasurer.
I don't know. Congress, Matt. Think big.
I am enjoying. I've enjoyed my year.
Any thoughts on the
XL.
people running
Yeah.
for office this year?
There's, a couple of open school committee seats. There may be some
Who's open in the school
competition for
committee?
others. Ward 4 will be open, and Steve Siegel in Ward 5 has hit term limits.
Oh, that's
unfortunately, which is
sad.
a big loss for the school committee. I think on the city
Steve's
council
been
side,
terrific. Yeah.
Steve's
And we only have one term of Margaret Albright left, too.
Margaret's going into her last term next time.
Mm-hmm.
Steve has been a phenomenal just phenomenal on buildings, on collective bargaining.
We've only got a
on
minute left,
culture.
and I want to let.
Ward 2, City Council, Emily Norton, who
Superstar.
has been
She has
just
been-
an outstanding counselor.
Absolutely.
There are people who don't like her.
So we've got common
but this
ground
is
on
a
this.
thoughtful person who
Terrific
is a
environmentalist, good head for
prototype
numbers.
of what a good ward counselor does. She's being challenged. I expect two things from Emily. Number one, I expect her to work unbelievably hard to win.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I expect her to win comfortably.
From
very
your lips to
comfortably.
God's ears. I know she'll work hard, but
I
I'll
am
hope
in total agreement with
we only got a
Matt
minute left.
about
Any
Emily.
other thoughts-
About
any
Emily.
other thoughts on
Emily
this?
Norton is doing a great job, and I've always liked her since the day she came in. School committee, I agree that Steve Siegel has been really, really good. I don't know Diane. I think Diana. No, is Diana? Yeah, Diana's leaving too. Yeah, she's
gone.
She's done too. I haven't dealt very much with the school
Ward
committee
4
people.
will be
Yeah,
open as well. So
Ward
2
4.
open seats.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's
And
going to be
maybe
interesting.
Well, are we going to have a lot of contested races, though? Are we?
There might be some other contested races
Yeah.
on the school committee. I've heard some rumblings, but until someone steps forward, they're
Sure,
just
you don't want to
rumblings.
spill any beans. Then I'm
Well,
sure
I don't have any beans to spill. Someone has to actually step forward, not just say they're
It's
thinking
early
about
too.
it.
It is.
All right.
It's kind of
It-
early.
it
really.
is
I would
early,
expect on the city council, I'm hearing more rumblings there, and I would expect there to be some
We
challenges.
had
in
7
the
new
number
people
of
in the
wards.
city council came. 7 new people came in, which is almost
Yeah.
a third of the city council.
I think there's going to be a lot of. I think there's going to be a lot of contested.
We're set in
races.
Ward
you?
7. We got Mark, we got Becky, who's a phenomenal new counselor. We
Anyway.
have Lyle, who's an institution. We're set.
As David Cohen says, he used to be a former alderman because he was.
Used to be.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you very much, Dick.
My pleasure.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
me,
Matt.
man.
That
I
hour
appreciate
went by
it.
pretty
I
fast.
appreciate it. Thank you.
And what we got to come. You got to promise to come back soon, more than once
promise.
every.
If
however-
asked, I will come.
Oh, good. Because we're going to have to follow up on all this stuff, and there's a lot more to talk about.
I'm sorry, Amy couldn't come.
Yeah,
too,
well,
actually.
Amy, I think will hopefully come next time.
Good,
But
good.
Next month we'll have Emily Norton at this table. Speaking
Yeah,
of which,
great.
That'd be good.
and
Good.
on Valentine's Day. So mark your calendars. Well, we've got our next show on Valentine's Day, February 14th, and so please join us again then when we try to find just a little bit more common ground.